My approach, first I want to thank Benti and Jacques to have invited me at this meeting, because my work is essentially work of a research evaluator and a sociologist of science. So I look at what people say, and I try to measure some of what they say to compare if what they say is what is in fact we observe and what we see. Because I think it's important to distinguish between performative discourse, what we want things to be. We want people to be more interdisciplinary and more interdisciplinarity. We want people to be excellent, to be innovators, to be international, to be intersectorial. We want them to do a lot of things. And then we have to check what happens when they try to do those things. And here, since the theme is the impact, I thought that since it's the first discussion and it's in direct relation with what Milena said about the danger of not looking at the specificity of the social sciences and humanities, I thought the best would be first to look at the practices to show that there are, in fact, fundamental differences between the natural sciences and the social sciences, and also even between social sciences and humanities. And my point is that the word impact and all the discourse about impact factor, H index, all this garbage, because that's what it is in terms of technology. And I showed that in a book. I won't have the time to go in detail on this because I have only 30 minutes, so I have to be blunt. But I wrote a book called Bibliometrics and Research Evaluation, Uses and Abuses, with MIT Press in 2016, where all the arguments about what I call garbage are proven with numbers. So first, the obvious differences, and we can measure them with bibliometrics, because I think it's very important to distinguish bibliometrics from evaluation. There's been the use in sociology of science of bibliometrics in the 1960s, and it's in fact, it's a fundamental tool to have a global view of scientific research. If you want to look at international collaboration across the world, who is collaborating with whom, not evaluating them, but measuring the changes over time. So I will show you some trends that will show that. First, here are the differences between the natural sciences, the social sciences, and the humanities in terms of, for example, the percentage of paper with more than one author. You see that in the natural sciences, 90% now of all the papers have more than one authors. This is a fundamental meaning. It means that the old ideology and mythology of, for example, Albert Einstein alone in his corner at the patent office was true in 1900. But we are no more in 1900, or in fact, we are a century later. This should be obvious, okay? But I will just give you an example that it is not obvious. There is a program that has been organized by a Canadian organization, which is very well known. It's the Waterloo Research Center. And they went to the third world, to Africa. And they said, we will launch and that's the title, the new Einstein Initiative, where they will ask young Africans, who of them is the best? And they will want to train them as future scientists to become the new Einstein. When I heard of that with the Kenyan government, I said, first, okay, you want the next young African to be a great scientist and you want him or her to be a new Einstein. It's total nonsense because it's a century too late. They should learn that they will work together with a lot of people depending on the discipline. In chemistry, 4 or 5, in astrophysics, it was 25 and 30. So it's a different thing. In the social sciences, of course, you see that the percentage of publications with more than one author is half. In the humanities, it's about 10%. But why is that? Is it because humanities are afraid to work together? No. I think the basic explanation is neither social nor epistemological, but ontological. There is no Chinese electrons. There is no Italian galaxies, but there are an Italian society, there are Italian cultures, and there are Quebec cultures. So this is a national object, this is a local object. So astrophysics is an abstract object that can be studied at the same time and together by an American, a Canadian, and a Chinese. It's much more difficult to ask the Americans, who are supposed to be better than us, to look at the Canadian society or even at French society, because Americans are well known, there are numbers on this. They are the ones who are, and then we should number, less collaborating internationally. They are the ones who know less foreign languages, so they read English. German, French, Italians, Canadians know more languages, okay? So those are practices. So instead of saying to the humanities, hey, you should work with people, you should meet 5 authors, specificity is that we study things that are different from other things. So there is such a thing as an ontology of scientific objects. Psychology is not history, and it's not either linguistics. And this is why, if you look at the subset here, we look at, for example, the level of international collaboration between countries. Again, over 30 years. We see a very strong raises in the natural sciences, and it's linked, of course, with also the higher cost of research or many social and technical reasons for that. Of course, it's much, much lower and even very few in humanities, because by definition, yet there's one author on the paper. So using an indicators of international collaboration through papers makes sense in the natural sciences, a little bit in social sciences, and it's nonsense in the humanities. The international collaboration in humanities can be measured. It's measured, for example, through the acknowledgements and through the presence in international conferences like this one, where we come from many countries. But again, specificity, we should not transfer mechanically methodology, thinking from the natural sciences to the social sciences, and even those of the social sciences should not be automatically transferred without thinking to the humanities. Third numbers here. That's very interesting. We talk about internationalization. Here, the circle on the top, each point is a country. We see that in the 70s, the density of international collaboration between countries was much lower than in the 90s, and now, everyone is collaborating with everyone. Just for the Canadian cases, we collaborate with about 120 different countries. And when I say we, I mean the scientists, the people who are not the government. Scientists are doing it. So we see a trend which is clear of international collaboration, but there is a danger to say, okay, we should do more of that. No, we should do more of that if the object we are looking at necessitates that. Same thing with interdisciplinarity. It's reversing the logic of the things. Instead of saying, okay, I have a problem here, how to solve that problem? Okay, I need a chemist maybe, if I'm in the health sciences. I need a sociologist because sociology of health is even more important than genetics in practice, but I need geneticists. So it means that for health, the object opens automatically interdisciplinarity. If I'm trying to construct a nuclear reactor, I don't need more than physics, in fact. So interdisciplinarity is a consequence of the object and not the reverse, forcing interdisciplinarity on different objects. And of course, the international collaboration depends on countries. Here we see that on average, the level of publications in international collaboration by the US is about half of what it is for European countries, for France, for Canada, for Germany, and things like that. So there are differences between countries also. And here you have the big map of international collaboration, and there's a big asymmetry. And this has consequences. Because there is a much tendency, particularly in Europe, about saying, okay, we have the Europeanization of science, which is a perfect performative discourse. And I will come to the numbers of the consequences of this. Okay, now we say, okay, but there's a lot of work about, oh yes, citations and things like that. If we look at scientific papers in the social sciences and in the sciences, we observe that in the sciences, 80% to 90% of the references will be to scientific papers, because in physics, since the 18th century and the end of the end of the 18th century, you don't publish anymore big books like Galileo or Newton. You publish a small paper in Physical Review or in Il Nuovo Cimento, okay? But in social sciences, you still publish books. And books have the most impact in social sciences, in history and humanities, even more than it. So the practice shows that if you look at journals, even papers in social sciences, what do they cite? They cite books more than papers. That's a very important practice that we have to take into account if we want them to measure the impact. Here is a map of showing that even in the social sciences, you see that the people in economics tends to cite more and more scientific papers in their papers than books. Whereas in history, we cite essentially books. We don't cite much papers. What is the consequence of that? Is that for a historian, the real contribution and impact is through a book. That does not mean that he should not write papers or she should not write papers, but the fact that she writes paper is not the first thing to impose on them because it's easier to measure the impact of papers than measuring the impact of book, which is wrong. That's what people say, but for technical reason, it's not easy to measure. Okay, and there are national traditions even in the trends I just showed. I give you aggregated data at the world level, but the tendency to cite papers is even different in Germany, in the States, and in France. I just give one example. That, for example, in the 2000s, 47% of the references by American sociologists were to articles, whereas the French articles in sociology cite papers only 30%, which means that they cite 70% of books. So even between an American sociologist and a French sociologist, the tendency to look at papers versus books is different. We have to take that into account. This is the reality. This is the practice of those people. And Germany is right in between, with about 1/3 of the papers citing articles, 2/3 citing books. So there are those traditions. And also we have to take into account the fact that different countries have different major topics. So it's a complex map, but it shows the correlation between the research teams and the large countries. And we see that, in fact, not countries have the same affinity between themselves. So the correlation between Europe and North America, for example, is very strong because Central Europe. But if you compare with the former Soviet Union, which is somewhere the CIS here, we see that there's not much correlation. Why? Because the topics they look at in social sciences are quite different. So if I want to be more with the United States, for example, I can predict that the first consequence that will happen is that, okay, I will have to change the topics because they're not interested in my topic. So if I want to work with them, I will have to use their topics. That's what those complex correlation shows. Even worse than that, here is a measure of the impact of the so-called globalization of the social sciences. I said, okay, it's good, everyone is good, globalization, we have to work together, well, that's fine. Now what are the consequences? They said, okay, but if people, say from less developed countries, work more with Europe or with the States and publish in the English journal and the best international journal, it will make their work more visible. Okay, that's a good hypothesis. That's not a fact. A fact has to be measured. Then we measure the fact and we observe exactly the contrary. We observe that someone from an underdeveloped country that wants to publish in the so-called major journals, first of all, he cites when he published there less of his local papers because he has to cite more of the global paper to give the impression that he is doing something of interest to them. And on the converse, those who are already dominant don't give a damn interest anymore. So there's no more rising citations from the north to the south. There is diminishing citations from the south in the north. It's a total effect, diminishing visibility of their local objects, which is exactly the perverse effect that we did not want, but that's what happened. We We have a paper in that in the World Social Science Research of 2010 done by UNESCO. And we have an update in the Sociological Journal in 2015 for those who want the details of those measures. Of course, we have already mentioned that there's a lot of limits to existing bibliometric uses that are used from the sciences and mechanically imposed on the social sciences. Because there is, of course, in the actual database like Web of Science and Scopus, they have a very strong overrepresentation of Anglo-Saxon journals. So if you measure the impact with that, you're in fact measuring the interest of those people in your research. You're not measuring the impact of that. That can be measured. And the fashionable indicators like H-index and impact factor are not technically valid indicators. Now we come to the perverse effect of research evaluation based on bibliometrics. Because as we say in French, l'enfer est pavé de bonnes intentions. Hell is paved with good intentions. So everyone wants good things, but they rarely think before that maybe the good things they want in practice will have the reverse effect, a boomerang effect that will have the reverse effect. So first begin with the pressure to publish in so-called international journal, because the question is, what is an international journal? What is that? For example, is it an American journal? People will tend to say yes. I say, okay, let's measure that. What is international? I say, okay, international should be a journal like, for example, say, European Journal of Sociology, where you will have papers from United States, Italy, Greece, Germany. So the proportion of different countries in a journal is a good first measure of international. Okay. Then what is the American Journal of Sociology? It's 91% American papers. What is the Canadian Journal of Sociology? It's 61 Canadian with a lot of Australian, New Zealand, and British papers, which means, curiously, the Kenyan Journal of Sociology is more international than the American Journal of Sociology, which is supposed to be the place where we should publish. Okay? It's more visible. The international visibility of the American Journal of Sociology is higher than the Canadian Journal of Sociology. That visibility concept is not the same thing as an international journal. It's a national journal, excellent national journal, talking about American problems, race, blacks, sex. And so if you want to publish there, you will abandon your local object. This has been proven empirically in economics. Canadian people in economics says, okay, you're an economist, you should be publishing in the 5 top journals. And of course, who are the 5 top journals? Journal of Economic Literature and American Journal of Economics. Do they want a lot of papers on the dynamics of the Canadian Bank of Canada? They don't care about this. They care about, and it's normal, it's an American journal, they care about the American banks. Or they care about a theorem showing the existence of an equilibrium in a 12-dimension space that does not exist on Earth, but economists don't care about this. They will publish that in the Journal of Economic Literature. So you have a delocalization of objects when you push too far on this. You have also the devaluation of books because they cannot be measured. Some people have found equations. Okay, a book is equivalent to 4 papers. Why? Why a book is 4? Why not 5? Why not 3? Or 2.5? It's totally absurd. And as I said, there's a decline of interest for local objects. You want to be international? Stop studying the south of France. Stop studying the north of Italy. Study something abstract. The debate between Habermas and Bourdieu. Okay? Let's talk about this. Everyone wants to read that, but it's totally abstract. It's purely theoretical. And and this is grave, this is very important, there is a decline of national journal in social science and humanities. In France or elsewhere, they will say, oh, shut this journal, it's a local journal. And I don't want to create polemics, but this has been contributed in part by organizations that are here, like the European Science Foundation, who first, in the 2000, created a list of journals, A for the best, B for the national, and C for the regional. And I happen to have looked at that for the discipline I know, which is sociology of science. What did I find? I found that behind the classification was a very simple ideology and kind of colonial behavior not seen. A were Anglo-Saxon journal. B were the national, say France, British, and C were the regional ones. It was not correlated with the quality of the papers. It was related with a perception of what it is to be an international journal. So those are dangerous things. We have to think about this if we believe that we have this specificity. That does not mean we don't evaluate social sciences. That means that if you want to measure it, you measure it with the good indicator for the good reasons that are specific to the objects. Conclusions. So, as I just said, the publication practices greatly vary according to discipline. And there are, even now, if we had time, the natural sciences, even them are different from the medical sciences. The biomed, this is not by chance that it's in the biomedical research domains that the debates has been the strongest about the H-index and the impact factor, because they are the most crazy about using that as a supposed measure of quality. Because there is a hierarchy of scientific objects. Working on AIDS, working on genes, it's much better than working, for example, on the diet and the quality of the environment for your health, because you won't get a so-called high-impact journal. We have to go back to the definition of high-impact journal, and it's a dangerous concept that has a lot of perverse effect, as I just mentioned. We have to use valid indicators, and this I did not go into detail because those are technical aspects. I give just an example. If you want to know the temperature here, you use a thermometer, okay? If you say, well, but it's humid, you know, it's quite humid here because it's an old place, then you use an hygrometer, not a thermometer. Thermometer gives you temperature, hygrometer gives you humidity. It's two different concepts, two different indicators. And you have to measure the validity of this indicator, not saying, oh, it's a good indicator, I take it. No. Who shows it's valid? Take the thermometer, okay? Here I have, suppose, a numerical value of the thermometer. I look at it, it shows 18. Then I look at it in two minutes later, it's 23. Okay, maybe I'm excited and I get hot. Then I look at it 3 minutes later, it's 12. What does that show? The thermometer is broken. Because the temperature here cannot change in 5 minutes like that. So if you have a ranking, like take by chance the Shanghai ranking, that as a president of university, you say, oh, I was 125 last year, and now I am 135 in 1 year. He's very glad I went up. No. A university is a big tanker. Cannot turn like that every year. So the thermometer is broken. It fluctuates like that. It's a bad measure. Okay? That's for sure. And there are technical reasons why it's a bad measure. But if you go up, you will say, I'm glad it's because I'm the president of the university. If it goes down, I'm still the president of the university, but now the problem comes from the government. You should give me more money so that I go up the ranking. Instead of saying, no, the ranking is bogus, I take it, I put it in the garbage. And every year when the journalists say, hey, what do you think about the last Shanghai? I said, I don't give a damn, thank you. We have to have the guts to know the content of the thing, because otherwise, it's the famous example of the emperor's new clothes. Now the university president's new clothes is his ranking. And then come the children and say, but you're naked because the ranking is bogus. So the mechanical and unreflexive use of any indicators are dangerous for the future diversity of research, and particularly in the social sciences and humanities, much more than in the natural sciences, which have a different dynamic, different objects, a different ontology. Thank you very much.